Good morning. You're watching live coverage, the Mission Control Houston. Soyuz MS-23 landing, Expedition 69 crew returned to the Earth. Russian Mission Control Center, Soyuz deep orbit and entry burn capsule, all over the down on landing, Kazakhstan.
Десять секунд. Есть работа ДПО. 5 секунд отработали. 10. 15. 15 секунд отработаны. ДСО нет. Конец временного цикла.
Это сначала отключаем визир плеча по любому команду ВМ В-18.
Готов выдать В-18.
Да, Владимир 18 выдаем. По 44 пока не спешите, сейчас вам уставки заложат. И мы потом сразу заключительные операции сделаем.
Помехи, Игнат. Сильные помехи. Да, отлично. Да, все слышно. Так, В-18 выдаем, правильно? Выдаем. В-18. Выдаем. Визир плеча лодского. Выдам. Наддув 1, 2, 3 не горит, акселерометр не горит, наддув не горит. И 1 горит за предельнического режима. Не выдаем. Не выдаем. Принято 1. Выдаю команду А11, выбор ДПО К1. Есть первый коллектор. Выключаю пару, работай по ССВП. Пара выключена. Принято, работаю тогда ССВП. Выдаю Д8 команду отключения ССВП. Выдана команда, есть погасание Д11, погасание Д17, Г17 также не горит. Принято. Параметры КДУ 158 первом, втором. Д11 не горит. Четыреста 456. Перехожу в РОДК. Перевожу. Включаю команду РО-Ориент. РО-Ориент горит. Принято, РУС убираю транспортное. Иду на формат ТВС. Отключаю телевидение. Телевидение выключено. 11:03. Да, принято. Принято по 48-й. Принято.
Отлично, спасибо.
Второй раз уже видит ее. Но это я рад был больше. Это лучше. Да, это как-то родней. Да, мы машем. Иллюминатора не видно?
Нет, здесь у меня уже тень.
На ТС-4 загорелся признак спуск.
Так, Сергей, ну ты считаешь, что камера GoPro работает, да? На ТЗК.
Some 5.5 hours ago, the crew members departing the International Space Station gathered in the Prishal module attached to the multi-purpose laboratory module, NAOKA, on the Earth-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station to bid a final farewell to Rubio, Prokopiev, and Petelin that you see in the background at the hatchway to their Soyuz spacecraft. The 10 crew members that was then, at that time, Expedition 69, gathered for final pictures before the 3 departing crew members floated inside the Soyuz spacecraft and hatches were closed. This hatch closed on the station side of the docking interface between the Soyuz and the International Space Station, followed a few minutes later by the closing of the hatch on the Soyuz side. There were leak checks conducted. The 3 crew members donned their Sokol launch and entry suits, conducted leak checks on those suits, and they were all set to depart the International Space Station. Communications and systems checks were also conducted with the Soyuz crew on board the MS-23 spacecraft before the undocking occurred. With all of the systems on the Soyuz spacecraft in good shape, the command was issued to open up the hooks holding the Soyuz in place to the Prishal module, and at 2:54 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time, 3:54 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern Time, the Soyuz departed the International Space Station as Rubio, Prokopiev, and Petelin left the complex that had been their home for more than a year. Within minutes after the undocking, two separation burns were conducted by the Soyuz engines to create an opening rate between the Soyuz and the International Space Station, allowing the Soyuz to move to a distance of some 24 miles away from the station where it currently resides, waiting for the final deorbit burn that is scheduled coming up at 5:24 and 9 seconds a.m. Central Time, 6:24 and 9 seconds a.m. Eastern Time. The configuration of the International Space Station before the undocking showed the two Soyuz vehicles, as you see in this graphic, the MS-23, that Rubio, Prokopiev, and Petelin are on board. The MS-24 spacecraft that was parked alongside of MS-23 was the vehicle in which site for today's recovery operations. They will be taking off in Russian Mi-8 helicopters, making their way in about a 35-minute flight to the landing site in south-central Kazakhstan. They are also accompanied by all-terrain vehicles and an Antonov 26 fixed-wing aircraft that is serving today, as it always does for the Soyuz landings, as an airborne data and communications relay center, relaying data and voice from the crew once it approaches the landing site back to the Russian flight control team in Korolyov.
We assembled it successfully. Thank you. Good luck to you.
A few weeks ago, FrankRubio, who is the new all-time record holder for the longest single spaceflight in U.S. history, had an opportunity for a brief chat with the former record holder, NASA astronaut Martin Vande Hei, whose record stay of 355 days in space was eclipsed back on September 11. Let's take a look at that quick conversation between Rubio and Vande Hei about tips that Vande Hei provided Rubio about today's entry and landing.
Since it's been a long time since your Soyuz instructors talked to you about landing and what to do, I'm going to remind you about a couple things that I might have made a mistake on. I succeeded with keeping my mouth shut when we hit the ground. That was a good thing, so I didn't bite my tongue off. And but make sure you do keep your head in the seat. You will have the strength to be able to lift your head off the seat. So when you're tempted towards the end to check how far above the ground you are, don't do that, because it might creep up and get you before you thought it was there, because you do hit just as hard as everybody says you do.
Yeah, the good thing about that is that I'll have some help, because I think my spine has extended just enough that I kind of am wedged into my seat liner, so I shouldn't move very much at all.
FrankRubio, a medical doctor, and now the new record holder for the longest single spaceflight. Once the deorbit burn occurs, as you see in this animation, it will slow the Soyuz down by 128 feet per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit. The pyros will fire about 27 minutes later to separate the three sections of the Soyuz vehicle, the descent module that the crew is strapped in, ready for entry, the only piece of the Soyuz that survives with its heat shield pointed in the direction of travel. About 15 minutes before touchdown, parachutes will deploy from the Soyuz in a carefully choreographed sequence that will enable the Soyuz to gently sway toward the landing site in Kazakhstan. Just a few seconds before touchdown, the soft landing engines will fire in a final braking maneuver, and the Soyuz will have touchdown. Again, the touchdown point about 90 miles to the southeast of Zhezkazgan in a remote area on the steppe of Kazakhstan, where the Russian search and recovery forces, comprising the Rosaviatsia Civil Patrol, will be waiting along with RSC Energia personnel to begin the extraction of the crew from the Soyuz spacecraft. Once out of the spacecraft, the crew will be placed in reclining chairs, comfortable chairs, to enable them to have a few minutes to regain their equilibrium. They will be feeling the tug of gravity against their bodies for the first time in more than a year today. They will then be carried in those chairs to a nearby inflatable medical tent for medical exams and an opportunity to take their Sokol launch and entry suits off and get into more comfortable flight clothing. They will be then carried to 3 waiting helicopters, Mi-8s, Russian Mi-8 helicopters, for a 2-hour flight back to the staging city in Karaganda, Kazakhstan, where they will split up, Rubio boarding a NASA jet for a flight back to Houston, and the 2 cosmonauts, Prokopiev and Petelin, boarding a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft for their flight back to Star City, Russia, and their training base outside of Moscow. The latest weather reports from the landing site not quite as optimistic as they were earlier in the day. The temperature is hovering around the 70-degree mark Fahrenheit, but we're now looking at broken clouds at around 6,000 feet. There have been some rain showers in the area. We are hopeful, of course, of getting Just to recap, the Soyuz MS-23 on its way home following the deorbit burn that was just completed successfully. Perfect timing, good pressure, good deceleration of the Soyuz, enabling it to begin to slide back out of orbit into the Earth's atmosphere. This coming in the wake of the undocking of the Soyuz from the Prishal module earlier this morning at 2:54 a.m. Central Time, 3:54 a.m. Eastern Time. And again, in this animation, you'll see the next event. There is the module separation that will occur pyrotechnically. The descent module, where the crew is located, will enter the Earth's atmosphere. Temperatures around the spacecraft will build to about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, heading toward the landing site in Kazakhstan. A series of events will deploy a drogue chute and then a main parachute about 15 minutes before touchdown. The chute deployment sequence will occur, setting the stage for the firing of the soft landing engine just about 1 or 2 seconds before touchdown. That is planned to be about 90 miles to the southeast of the town of Jezkazgan. The Russian Mi-8 helicopters are airborne now, heading for the landing site, which is about a 35-minute flight. They will arrive in a circular racetrack pattern around the landing site that you see there at the bullseye mark, moving from southwest to northeast, passing just south of Baikonur, the cosmodrome where the Soyuz launches take place. Most recently, Laurel O'Hara launching with Oleg Kononenko and Nikolai Chub on the Soyuz MS-24 spacecraft. They're now part, of course, of Expedition 70. The weather at the landing site right now is showing broken clouds at about 6,000 feet, light winds, temperature around 69 degrees Fahrenheit, and some rain showers in the area. So it is questionable as to what our visibility will be of the spacecraft descending under the parachute. We'll stand by, of course, And as soon as we have video from the landing site, we'll bring it to you. We're about 44 minutes away from touchdown. Once the spacecraft does touch down, the search and recovery forces will land in sequential fashion in those Russian Mi-8 helicopters. The most critical personnel, the RSC Energia personnel, and the search and recovery forces will make their way to the spacecraft and begin the process of opening up the hatch and extracting the crew one by one, placing them in nearby chairs alongside their vehicle. They'll have a few minutes to gain some equilibrium, feeling the effects of gravity for the first time in more than a year before they're carried in those chairs into a nearby inflatable medical tent so that their Sokol launch and entry suits can be removed. They'll receive initial medical exams and be put in more comfortable flight clothing for the subsequent 2-hour helicopter flight back to the staging city of Karaganda.
Copy. I'll give you the time in a second. Okay, main engine cut off, command 132847. Copy. How copy? Yes, copy. Our specialists are working.
One thing that we'll note here, in about 8 minutes, as the Soyuz moves to a distance of about 87 miles away from the International Space Station on its descent towards the beginning of the traceable senses of Earth's atmosphere, that will end our guaranteed voice communication with the Soyuz through a relay to the International Space Station itself. That VHF relay still in place and being heard, of course, by the Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow. So starting at about 5:42, the communications from the Soyuz will be a bit choppy. We may lose comm for a while, especially as the Soyuz descends into the peak heating regime for about 5 minutes. That peak heating regime will begin at about 5:56 a.m. Central Time. Often communications is lost for several minutes until the Soyuz emerges from that plasma regime that builds up that ionization around the spacecraft itself. At that point, the Soyuz will begin to approach the area where voice communication will be established with the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that is flying in the vicinity of the landing site to relay data from the spacecraft as well as voice back to the Russian flight control team in Korolyov. Three countdown clocks here in Mission Control are ticking backward towards major events that are upcoming. The separation of the three sections of the Soyuz about 14.5 minutes from now. The opening of the parachutes some 25.5 minutes from now. Landing now just under 40 minutes southeast of Zhezkazgan, Kazakhstan. Slowing the Soyuz down by 128 feet per second, enabling it to begin its descent back to Earth. We're less than 7.5 minutes away now from the next milestone. That will be the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz, discarding the orbital module and the instrumentation and propulsion module, leaving just the descent module with the 3 crew members strapped inside. Sergei Prokopiev, the Soyuz commander, in the center seat, flanked to his left by Dmitry Petelin, and to his right by FrankRubio. And now reports having been received from the Russian Mission Control Center of a nominal separation of the 3 sections of the Soyuz. Module separation is now complete. That all went by the book. The next milestone about 3 minutes from now, and that will be the Soyuz hitting the top of the Earth's atmosphere.
National Station on 2 for OCT2.
The Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the Rosaviatsa search and recovery forces, are nearing the landing site southeast of Jezkazgan to move into a racetrack pattern, an oval-shaped pattern around the landing zone, awaiting the arrival of the Soyuz spacecraft, with touchdown scheduled about 23.5 minutes from now. Flight controllers in Korolyov outside Moscow receiving data from the Soyuz spacecraft through their communications satellites, the Luch system. The Soyuz now has entered the Earth's atmosphere. The 3 crew members feeling the first effects of gravity on their bodies in 371 days. Just over 8 minutes until the scheduled deployment of the parachutes. Soyuz currently descending through the Earth's atmosphere, 6.5 minutes to go until the commands will be sent to begin the parachute deployment sequence. As expected, we are not receiving voice communication from the crew. This is typical at this point of the entry sequence. Once the spacecraft passes through the plasma regime, the period of peak heating, we should be hearing from the crew once again with communications relayed through the Antonov 26 fixed-wing aircraft in the vicinity of the landing site. You're looking at a view from balcony camera in the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow, their International Space Station Flight Control Room. All is quiet here at Mission Control in Houston as flight controllers belonging to the Orbit 1 team continue to watch over the International Space Station and follow developments on the Soyuz's descent for its touchdown in south-central Kazakhstan. Landing is scheduled just over 19 minutes from now. As we approach the top of the hour, we'll be standing by for confirmation of a chute deploy that is scheduled just over 3.5 minutes from now. The Soyuz should be emerging from that plasma regime any minute.
Please report if you read me. Yes? And how are you feeling? We are feeling great. Thank you. End of control. Indicator is +18. Index positive +1. Copy.
As the Soyuz MS-23 approaches its landing site in Kazakhstan, touchdown expected less than 14.5 minutes from now. We We should be getting confirmation momentarily on the opening of the chutes. The Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the search and recovery forces, are approaching on station in the landing zone around where the Soyuz will touch down 13.5 minutes from now. We should be getting confirmation momentarily on chute deploy. Twelve and a half minutes until touchdown. Still awaiting confirmation from the search and recovery forces that they have the Soyuz in sight under its parachute. We now have confirmation that the Soyuz parachute has been deployed. Once again, the Soyuz MS-23 is now descending toward its landing just about 11 minutes from now. Its parachute has deployed. The crew is feeling well, according to Sergei Prokopyev, the Soyuz commander. All of the entry events have gone by the book to this point. The skies are quite overcast at the landing site. Temperatures around 69 degrees. We're still waiting for video from the landing site. But the Soyuz has deployed its parachute, and everything is continuing to go as planned for an on-time touchdown just about 9 minutes and 40 seconds from now. The search and recovery forces at the landing site now confirm that they have the Soyuz in sight under its parachute. All of the events to this point have been a winner. Everything has gone according to schedule, and the crew, according to Sergei Prokopyev, the Soyuz commander, is feeling well. Just 8.5 minutes until touchdown. Now about 7 minutes until touchdown. Everything continuing on course. The chutes have been deployed for the Soyuz MS-23. It is gently descending under its large orange and white parachute. Search and recovery forces have the vehicle in sight. The Russian Mi-8 helicopters are circling the landing zone waiting for touchdown, at which point they will descend and land in sequential fashion to begin the process of arriving at the capsule and extracting the crew. And there's our first view of the Soyuz MS-23 under the chutes. 6 minutes until touchdown. This video is courtesy of Roscosmos. Soyuz descending at its normal rate of descent. Search and recovery forces are reporting back that everything is looking good from their perspective. There were some rain showers in the area earlier today. The Soyuz descending under a deck, several decks of broken clouds toward its touchdown point about 90 miles to the southeast of Zhezkazgan. Again, this video courtesy of Roscosmos from the landing site.
Inaudible.
Less than 5 minutes to go until touchdown. The extended mission of FrankRubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin is now in the home stretch. Once again, you're looking at the return of FrankRubio, Sergei Prokopyev, and Dmitry Petelin after more than a year in space, less than 4 minutes from touchdown on the desolate steppe of Kazakhstan. The parachutes deployed as planned at 6:03 a.m. Central Time. 3 minutes later, the Soyuz heat shield was jettisoned.
409. Confirm.
The next event will be just a second or two before touchdown. That'll be the firing of the soft landing engine. 6 engines fire to slow the Soyuz descent rate to just 1.5 meters per second.
How do you read it? Inaudible. We observe you. We have a visual. How do you read us here? For 95,553.
Search and recovery forces communicating directly now with Sergei Prokopyev, saying that they have a good visual on the spacecraft. Just over 2 minutes until touchdown.
It has been 1,000 meters. We are not able to connect with them in audio yet. We can hear them, they are not hear us yet. It has been 1,000 meters. We hear them, they are not.
Less than 1,000 meters from touchdown.
So we are looking for the 20th and 52nd minute. Plus 9 atmospheric bias. Plus 18 index point 1. The crew is feeling well.
Sergei Prokopyev continuing to provide reports back to the search and recovery forces, indicating that the crew is doing well. Just over a minute until touchdown.
The crew is doing well. Let them know. Cosmos 9549. For your information, the object has passed 500 meters and feeling well. 690 is out.
The search and recovery helicopters are circling the landing zone. We might see one of those helicopters come into view shortly, as the Soyuz is less than 500 meters off the ground.
We have come with the crew and they're feeling well. Prepare. 100 meters to ground.
100 meters to go. The crew being told to brace for touchdown.
Object getting close to touchdown. Object.
Touchdown. Touchdown confirmed at 6:17 a.m. Central Time. Rubio's record ride comes to an end as he, Prokopyev, and Petelin return to Earth after a 371-day, 157 million-mile journey at the International Space Station. The third longest flight ever in human spaceflight history is over with a pinpoint landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan.
Altai. Search and recovery here. How do you read? Okay, all good.
Once again, Soyuz MS-23 has landed on the steppe of Kazakhstan. A bullseye touchdown for the 3 crew members, FrankRubio, Sergei Prokopiev and Dmitry Petelin.
409, how do you read? 249.
Landing occurring as planned at 6:17 a.m. Central Time, 7:17 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:17 p.m. at the landing site that you're seeing right now in our live view,
I believe so. Let it get a bit
about an hour and 53 minutes before sunset.
$952 is on the ground.
The Russian Mi-8 helicopters are now descending in sequential fashion to arrive in the vicinity of the spacecraft. You can see one of those helicopters in view. The all-terrain vehicles will be moving toward the spacecraft as well, repositioning themselves to enable us to get video of the recovery process, the extraction of the crew, and the crew will be placed in reclining chairs next to the Soyuz MS-23 for a few minutes to regain their equilibrium before they're carried in those chairs to a nearby inflatable medical tent where they will doff their Sokol launch and entry suits, get into more comfortable flight clothing, and then make their way with the assistance of recovery personnel to 3 helicopters, one for each crew member, for a 2-hour flight back to the staging city of Karaganda.
K1, K2.
At that point, Rubio and his 2 crewmates will split up. Rubio will board a NASA jet to fly back to Houston. Prokopiev and Petelin will board a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft to fly back to their training base at Star City, Russia, outside of Moscow. Courtesy of Roscosmos, Sergei Prokopiev, who was strapped into the center seat of the descent module of the Soyuz spacecraft, always the first out. He'll be followed by his 2 crewmates here shortly. Touchdown occurred just 20 minutes ago at 6:17 a.m. Central Time, 7:17 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:17 p.m. at the landing site. The crew home after 371 days in space, the 3rd longest space flight in history, and of course for FrankRubio, the longest single space flight by an American astronaut.
So did you realize that we are finally on the ground? It has been more than a year. Well, the result is the main thing. Just perfect, just ideal. That the overload was 4.5, greater than last time. So wet. I'll take care of you. All good. I'll just stay here, take care of you too. Don't turn, just stay where you are. Don't jump. And we have seen all your greetings on Air Force anniversary. Yes, and we also worked with the veterans of soccer teams here. Exactly. He has not changed at all. You look the same as when we were sending you off to space. So the data is ready.
Prokopiev exchanging greetings with some of the members of the search and recovery forces. Happy to see him for the first time in over a year. And from the view we just had, it appeared as if the Soyuz was pulled over onto its side
Congratulations.
as opposed to being upright.
Thank you. Easy, easy. Check the arm. Check the cables. Careful. Easy.
FrankRubio, the U.S. record holder for the longest single spaceflight in history, back on Earth.
Here you are. Don't fall. Very nice to see you. So great. We're all here. All went well. All the tasks completed. So we performed all the program and performed additional tasks.
Field test?
What about the field test? No, we're not going to have a field test now, but tomorrow we'll have a Soyuz constellation experiment that is going to be an interesting experiment on controlling manual descent. Thank you. Your foot this way.
Hello, Frank.
Great, thank you.
Great.
It's good to be back.
You're the doctor on the crew, mate. How is in the space? How is your mate?
Fantastic. Yeah, everybody did really well.
You look very well.
Thank
very
you.
Well.
Thank you. It's good to be home. Thank you. It's good to be home.
Thank you.
Once again, the view from the landing site, right by the Soyuz MS-23. FrankRubio on the left, Sergei Prokopiev on the right.
Check the arm on the right side.
And Dmitry Petelin now being removed from the Soyuz spacecraft.
Easy, easy here. Turn. Legs. Turn back. Remove cables. Little higher. Move him a bit higher.
FrankRubio receiving congratulations there from Joel Montalbano, the International Space Station Program Manager, who along with NASA's Chief Astronaut Joe Acaba, part of the NASA team on site.
Come on, Joe.
Серега!
Sergey?
And a view of the Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft that touched down 28 minutes ago at 6:17 a.m. Central Time.
Yeah, drink a little bit. Hold it. Everything is in due time. We're here in the steppe of Kazakhstan.
Sergei Prokopyev, the commander of Expedition 69 and the Soyuz commander for the landing today, comes home after 2 flights in space and a total of 568 days, putting him 12th on the all-time list for most days in space by a human being. And there are technicians who are gathering up the parachute that deployed about 15 minutes before touchdown.
Still a bit dirty, that happens. All good. Do you want me to comb your hair?
После футболиста. А также мочу только нормально, ничего удара не было. Такое. Приложила.
So you had it was a bump, so it did feel it.
This is Mission Control Houston, continuing to receive video from the landing site in south-central Kazakhstan. On the right, Sergei Prokopyev, the Soyuz commander and the commander of Expedition 69, which came to an end with the undocking of the Soyuz MS-23 this morning at 2:54 a.m. Central Time, 3:54 a.m. Eastern Time. Expedition 70 began, Prokopyev handing over command of the International Space Station to European Space Agency astronaut Andy Mogensen. Expedition 70 now well underway and will continue through the course of the fall time frame until Mogensen returns to Earth next spring with Crew 7.
At about 300 meters, COM was established again. At that time, we also acquired visual. All normal, all good. Did you see us at the main chute? Yes, at about 800 we saw you already. You were not responding, but we were able to see you already. All great, all normal. Good numbers. 140 to 90. Don't scream over there.
The next step for the 3 returning crew members, they'll be, as you look at the all-terrain vehicles that are on site, the 3 crew members will be carried in those chairs into a nearby inflatable medical tent to doff their Sokol launch and entry suits, get into more comfortable flight clothing, and then they'll be transported in those ATVs to 3 awaiting Russian Mi-8 helicopters to take off for a 2-hour flight back to the staging city of Karaganda to the northeast of the landing site.
Soyuz didn't get any bigger.
Oh, really?
And maybe you want some pickles. Oh yeah. Maybe some succulent pork. That would be nice. Well, not right now, about a week. So then at the tent, you will talk to your wife, okay?
The landing occurred about an hour and 53 minutes before sunset at the landing site. You can see the sun beginning to fade on the horizon. On the left in the left side of your screen is Dr. Joe Schmidt, who is Rubio's attending flight surgeon, and on the right is the NASA nurse Yana Shelopova.
And then once we got all backed up, I couldn't reach it. I'd rather not be. I mean, it doesn't feel terrible.
Okay, they're bringing the watermelon for you. Make sure you clean it from the seeds. Okay, good. Oh, rada watermelon. Good deal. I am the commander of the search and recovery helicopter. So my apologies if we had to wait a little bit. But from all of us, we would like to give you this, the fruit of the earth. Oh, I can smell it now. Thank you. Sergey.
And Dmitry Patelin, who was board engineer number 1. He and Prokopiev conducted 6 spacewalks during their time on board the International Space Station.
As they should have. What did you bring from space? Good mood. And in my personal items, I had all the rings and crosses that I took with me. This is something green. I forgot what it feels like. I did request the watermelon in advance, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's move it a little bit closer. Closer to the center. Dmitry, you've been there for a year. Yes, actually, I was expecting to be here half a year before, and we've been waiting impatiently to get back. And it was my first landing. I didn't know what to expect exactly. Today I felt it to the fullest. the loads of gravity. What did you bring to your daughters from space? I brought souvenirs, photos, images that were brought to me by Progress vehicle. Are you going to follow some experiments right now as you returned as an operator? We are planning constellation Soyuz experiments, that is with a suit and using the arm, but that will depend on physically is possible. Thank you very much.
The crew members being presented with fruit at the landing site
For you.
and Matryoshka dolls.
I can open it. Dmitry. For you. That is a heavy one. A heavy wooden doll, Matryoshka. Thank you. And greetings to Kustana friends. Now pilots. Photo. They stand in the back.
Those Matryoshka dolls bearing the images of each of the three crew members being presented to them by members of the search and recovery forces.
I'm taking pictures of everybody. Oh, perfect. Very good.
The Soyuz landed 40 minutes ago at 6:17 a.m. Central Time, 7:17 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:17 p.m. at the landing site. The crew was quickly extracted, placed in these reclining chairs for an opportunity to regain their equilibrium. They'll be carried in those chairs a short time from now into a nearby inflatable medical tent where they will doff their Soka launch and entry suits, get into more comfortable flight clothing, receive medical exams, and then be flown on three individual helicopters 2 hours to the staging city in Karaganda, Kazakhstan, where they'll split up. Rubio boarding a NASA jet to fly back to Houston. Prokopiev and Patelin boarding a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft to fly back to their home base, their training base at Star City, Russia.
Pick up the blanket.
Prokopiev, thumbs up, being moved toward that medical tent.
Hooray! Welcome. Welcome back.
So with that, the three crew members being brought into the medical tent at the landing site following their pinpoint touchdown to complete a 371-day, 157 million mile mission, the longest space flight by an American astronaut, FrankRubio, the third longest space flight in history. As we mentioned, the crew members were quickly extracted from the Soyuz MS-23 that landed on time, on target, and are now being brought into the nearby medical tent. And there's a view of FrankRubio with Joe Acaba and the rest of the NASA team helping bring him into the medical tent. In the back, you see ISS program manager Joel Montalbano. The crew will get out of those Sokol launch and entry suits. They'll put on comfortable flight clothing and prepare for their helicopter flight back to Karaganda, Kazakhstan, and eventually their trip back to their respective hometowns. Rubio coming to Houston, Prokopiev and Patelin coming. 70 crew aboard the International Space Station. But for now, we'll bid you a good morning from Mission Control in Houston.
Good morning, the Mission Control, Houston.